Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Oh. Can everybody hear me? Okay, for whatever reason, it didn't release off mic. And so anyways, let me share this quote with you really quickly. The quote I'd like to share is from the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, and it begins, "And then I made firm the heavenly circle, and made that the lower water, which is under heaven, collect itself together into one whole, and that the chaos become dry, and it became so. Out of the waves I created rock hard and big, and from the rock I piled up the dry, and the dry I called earth. And the midst of the earth I called the abyss, that is to say, the bottomless. I collected the sea in one place and bound it together with a yoke. And I said to the sea, Behold, I give you your eternal limits, and you shalt not break loose from your component parts. And thus I made fast the firmament." All right. The reason I brought forth this particular passage is because it shows you how the earth as a circle inscribed upon a square was, as it says in Proverbs, encompassed upon the waters of the deep. And it was when the firmament was put into place that the waters above the firmament 1/3 and the waters below the 2/3 of the water below the firmament, as it says in scripture, they were gathered together in order to form the oceans and the seas and the waters that we see upon the earth. And that it was after the waters were gathered together in this manner and formed and encompassed the dry land that the Most High brought forth above sea level the dry land where all the creatures of the earth live and inhabit. And we see that the oceans are also said to be gathered together in one place and bound with a yoke. It's my opinion that we see that yoke as being the mountainous ice range, which has become what we tend to believe is the Antarctic ice wall. And that this is where the limits of the oceans are established, and also that it is there that the firmament comes down and attaches to this portion of the earth, and that together they form what is much like a snow globe. And we live inside of that kind of safe and protected space. And so the other thing that I wanted to kind of cover, because I know a lot of people are wondering about the feast days and when to celebrate them. A lot of people are starting to acknowledge the importance of observing in the best way they can and honoring the Levitical feast days that were mandated by Yahuwah in Leviticus chapter 23. And that the reason these holy days are so important is because they align with the first and what will be the second coming of Christ, as well as the creation and creation of humanity, the banishment of humanity, and the establishment of the earth. That there's a giant story which so few people are giving you much detail upon. Um, and it has to do with the Godhead, the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit as the motherly and feminine aspect of the Godhead, that they together reflect what is the unity of a family and that which humanity itself was created in the image of. And so this holy presentation of the dual aspect of what is creation, the male and female aspect, that's what we see represented in the creation itself. And so it would make sense that the creation is made in the image of the Godhead, male and female. And so, you know, but yet so many people would deny even this aspect. The other important thing about the reflection of humanity with regard to the Godhead is that it is also through this duality, male and female, that we have the present war and the contention amongst the angels and amongst the forces of the division of light and darkness playing out. That it is in the human world and upon our reality that the next aspect of the war in heaven is playing out. And how it is that the fall of humanity plays into that, that God decided to create, even though he had created all of his angels, he decided to create this other creature, little less than the angels, but one that he very much loved with all of its flaws and all of its um, partiality to being led astray and tempted and deceived, by the angels that the fallen angels that have been temporarily given reign over humanity. But at the end of days, it says in Scripture that we shall judge the angels, and it's because we will replace those that abandoned and left their first estate and were cast down, exiled, and banished here to this world because of it. And then those that lusted after the daughters of Cain and that falling in temptation were led astray into carnality and gave up even their eternity, gave up their immortality in order to be in um, physical love with the women that they found informed, embodied by the daughters of Cain. And so, that's another aspect of the truth which so many people won't speak about, and that it is, it wasn't an apple or a piece of fruit that led to the fall of humanity, but it was the temptation, the seduction of Eve by the serpent, and that the serpent was um, much like a pedophile in leading astray Eve, and Adam, not knowing any better, um, allowed it to happen. And it caused the downfall of all of them, which God said to the serpent, because he already saw that she was pregnant by him. I'm going to put enmity between your seed and the woman's seed. And he gave the first prophecy that Christ would come into the flesh and crush the head of the serpent. And again, as I said, this is all written into the stars. But, it's another one of those things that most people don't understand the story in the fullness that they should, because they don't accept certain aspects of truth and being vehemently opposed to them because they go against, what they've been taught in mainstream churchianity, they will not open themselves to the possibility of either that, the Godhead is male and female, or that the fruit could have been sexual deviance, which is why, again, it says that Eve had lost her virginity due to eating this apple, which, again, it can only be explained that a woman loses her chastity, her virginity, as it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 2 and 3, that she was morally, physically, and sexually corrupted, which is exactly what happened, which is why the consequences laid out in Genesis chapter 3 have to do with children, sorrow, and childbirth, and bringing forth descendants that would then need to be fed by, in the case of Adam, the sweat of his brow and working the ground. And so all of the consequences, the repercussions of their eating this fruit, is that children would be born into this world and that a war would be waged between them. And so this is another aspect of the truth which so many people are unwilling to look at, and that's the earth is not a sphere, globe, or a ball, that even the natural properties of water are such that there's no possible way that the earth can be a ball. It just can't happen with the properties of water. And so, no matter what people think about the shape of the earth, it is in no way a sphere. And so that has to be reassessed and reconsidered. And then the other aspect of what I'm going to be talking about tonight is that the calendar, the Sabbaths, and the feast days have all been changed because Satan changes, counterfeits, disrupts, and destroys everything. And so I'm going to speak about how it was that decrypting the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, I was then brought to understand the motions and the dynamics for how the luminaries move in the sky above the foundation of the earth. And that understanding these motions, one can easily determine what the correct calendar is that we are supposed to follow, because it is the natural one, and it is the one that is determined by the movements of the heavenly luminaries. And it's not one or the other. So many people follow either the solar calendar or the lunar calendar, or the Gregorian calendar, which is divorced from the moon and not even correct toward to the sun. But anyways, according to Enoch, one has to understand how both the sun and the moon and the dynamics and the motions of both incorporate into what is an even greater cycle, and that is the movement of the zodiac and the precession of the equinoxes over, you know, 20 plus thousands of years. And also how the different motions of the planetary systems themselves in the seven heavens determine certain cycles. And all of these cycles play together to create the clockwork mechanism of the universe. And this is what I'll be speaking on at the conference in November. I know I won't have enough time to really cover it all, but I will be sharing in book form explanation of these motions as well. And so I'm going to speak about that because my friend Laurel was giving an explanation to her Sabbath group as to why she believes that they are, even though they're trying to follow Sabbath according to once in every 7 days, Sabbath is set according to the phases of the moon. Because if you really think about it, nobody had ever given you a calendar, and we were all here and had to figure out how to create a calendar. That the things that we would do is observe the motions of the luminaries and determine the cycles that they um, hold in motion, and then figure out if there's something that connects to what we see with regard to the calculation of the measurements of time. And it could be easily determined that the movement of the sun over one 24-hour period creates the day, and that there is both, a lunar and a solar month, but that the movements of the moon are what create the beginnings, the waxing crescent, the beginning of the month, the lunar conjunction, the end of the month, and its quarterly phases, the 4 weeks of the month, and the weeks highlighted but by Sabbath and the quarterly phases of the moon. I mean, it should be easily determined that God would have set something in the heavens to give us indication as to when those things are to be honored by what he has encoded into the stars. And indeed, he has. And so, in my opinion, when you understand and you study the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, it becomes plain that Enoch and also the other patriarchs, prophets, and apostles, they understood this calendar, and that it was this specific calendar that was also given to Moses during the Exodus and reestablished during the time that the Israelites were freed from the bondage of Egypt. And he ordained this calendar, and it can be determined that he did so with the way that the feast days, even the Levitical feast days, being set up that on the 15th of the lunar month, which is only on a lunar calendar, that the 15th is every month a Sabbath. And we are to celebrate on the first month, which is the first month is Abib Nisan, meaning green ears, that this is when the harvest is starting to, the spring, everything starts to sprout. And then in the 7th month, when everything is also to be harvested before the coming of fall, that it is in the 7th month of Tishri on the 15th that we are to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. On the 15th of Nisan, we always celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And those days are always a Sabbath. And it's only by observing a calendar which is in sync with the phases of the moon that the 15th of every month will be a high full moon Sabbath. And what better day to have the celebration of those feasts than on the full moons of the 1st and the 7th months? And so, understanding what I'm going to be talking about tonight and confirming with many multiple witnesses as to how the seasons are created as well, this should give those of you that are new to the study of the calendar something to consider, and then utilizing your common sense, come to acknowledge as being what else would God have established than the heavenly luminaries to determine his grand calendar? And so if it doesn't make sense to you after tonight's show, I just don't, I guess people can believe whatever they want, but in my opinion, common sense lets us know that God has put heavenly signs, these luminaries, the greater and the lesser luminary, to mark what he says in the Targum rendition of Genesis, the creation of the luminaries, as the days, the weeks, the months, and the years, as well as the Sabbaths and the feast days, the Moedim, the appointed times. And so that's what we're going to go into tonight. I will begin with, let me find the passage. I'll be right back. All right, we're going to begin with a passage from, hold on, I have to highlight this, a different font color. Okay. I'm going to begin with a passage from the Vedic cosmology, the Srimad Bhagavatam, because this is one that most of you are not familiar with. And it's by sharing this that I'll be able to bring in also what is spoken about by Enoch in the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, as well as what Solomon writes in Ecclesiastes in the Bible. But it's the Targum version that you have to study in order to make sense of what I'm going to go into. In chapter 21, the reality of the sun god Surya. So it's speaking about the motions of the sun, just like Enoch does in the portion of the text on the great luminary. That sun passing through the north, through the south, or crossing the equator is known differently depending on its slowness, swiftness, or equality of movement. And what it's talking about here is when the sun is moving towards the Tropic of Capricorn, it moves in slower revolution because it has less distance to travel over the course of a 24-hour day. When it's moving towards the Tropic of Capricorn, the sun moves very much faster and is in rapid motion in order to keep and to travel that amount of distance in covering, again, a 24-hour day. When it is of equality of movement, that is when the sun is located on the equator for the autumnal and vernal equinox. And it is on those 2 days of the year that it divides the night and the day into equal 12-hour portion. In its rising and setting or staying up in different positions, it is making long, short, or equally long days, while it, as ordained, moves through the different signs of the astrological zodiac, beginning with the sign of Makara, which is Capricorn. And here in the Vedic cosmology, sort of like what our Gregorian calendar, they begin their calendar with the winter solstice, which in the book of Enoch on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, God starts the year with spring. and with the vernal equinox. But here in the Vedic cosmology, it's a little bit different. They begin with the winter solstice. So when the sun is in the sign of Makara, which is Capricorn, and we also know that it is when it is on the Tropic of Capricorn that we have the winter solstice occurring. And so the sign of Capricorn also yields with winter and the sun being located on the Tropic of Capricorn. And it says this is from December 22nd to January 19th. And then it says, when the sun enters Mesha and Tula, which is Aries, March 21st through April 19th, and Libra, which is the month of Tishri, September 23rd, which is again the vernal equinox, to October 22nd, or at the equinoxes. So it's speaking about the two equinoxes here, as I had stated previously, which is also the equinoxes and solstices are very important. They are the leaders for the beginnings of the seasons, according to the Book of Enoch, as I will also elaborate upon. The days and nights are of equal length. When it moves through the five first ones headed by Vishaba, which is Taurus, April 20th through May 20th, the days first increase for Taurus, April 20th through May 20th, and Gemini, May 21st through June 20th, and then decrease by half an hour every month, depending on their latitude. When it passes the 5 months beginning with Vrishek or Scorpio, October 23rd to November 21st, the lengthening and the shortening of the days and nights works opposite until the sun moves towards the south. Before the summer solstice, the days grow longer, and until it moves towards the north, before the winter solstice, the nights get longer, which is exactly what Enoch speaks about as well in his text. Thus, encircling with an orbit before the Manasatara mountains, thereabout of 90 yohanas long. So the scholars teach us one on the east side of Meru. Meru is the mount of the congregation located in the center of the earthen plane at the North Pole. Finds Devadani, the city of King Indra. South of it, the one named Samayamani of Yanajara. In the west, the one named Nimlokani of Varuna. And in the north, the one of the moon named Vyabavari. At all the four sides of Meru as the energetic pivot, thus creating sunrise, sunset, noontime, and midnight. It brings about the particular times of the living beings to be active or to cease their activity. So here what it's talking about how is that Mount Meru, or what is called the Mount of the Congregation, is at the center of the earth plane, or what is the North Pole. And then you have, it also describes in the Mercator projection map how from the North Pole there's this whirlpool that surrounds this particular mount of the congregation. It's called Rupus Negra, the Black Rock. It's a completely lodestone mountain, said to be the reason why all the magnetic needles point northward, but that it is divided into four regions, just like you have Eden in the book of Genesis divided into four portions. So is this describing the same thing. And he says that there are four regions and they all, are divided by the cardinal points, and that these cardinal points also determine when sunrise, which is on the east side, sunset, which is on the west side, noontime, which is on the south side, and midnight, which is on the north side, occur. And it's because the sun circles over the course of these 24 hours that we have these 6 hour portions segmented in such way, which is again confirmation that it is the sun moving in circle above us. Those who live in those places are by the sun in the position of the middle of the day always are heated. It moves turning left around the mountain Meru, and from the point where it rises to the diametrically opposite point where it sets, when one locally no longer sees the sun in the sky because it has set, it causes the people to sleep, while diametrically opposite to that place, the people are sure to have seen the sun rising, which, because of its heat, makes them sweat. And so you see that night and day, and these 12-hour portions, according to the movement of the sun back and forth between the tropics, the day gets longer and shorter, and the seasons change according to this motion, which again is exactly what Enoch describes as well. Along with it, also the other planets and stars headed by the moon are seen rising and sitting in the celestial sky. The vehicle has only one wheel with 12 spokes. The 12 spokes are the months of the year. The 6 segments are the seasons, and the 3 pieces to its hub are the 4-month periods, which in its entirety is known as a solar year or a samyasasara. And again, as I said, this is exactly what Enoch describes for the motions of the sun as well. Its axle is fixed on the top of Mount Meru with Manasatara at the other end. The wheel of the chariot of the sun being fixed there rotates to the mountain range of the Manasatara like a wheel of an oil press machine. Fixed to the base of that axle, there is a second one which, like with the axle of an oil press machine, measures a quarter of its length. Its upper portion is fixed to Dhruvaloka, which Dhruvaloka is the Vedic word for Polaris, which we know Polaris again is in the sides of the north above the Mount of the Congregation. It is the center of all the stars, and it, like the earth, is motionless, fixed. It is also indicative of the movements, the establishment of the heavenly temple and the throne room of the Most High God, that there also live the righteous. The home of the righteous, our first estate, and where Adam and Eve were tending God's paradise, is above the vaulted dome. That's why it says in Revelation 20 and 21 that New Jerusalem will descend out of the heavens. Because right now, Adam and his children, the tree of life, all of that is above the vaulted dome in the garden of God. But that it will come down here to the earth for the millennial reign. All right. What I'm going to speak about next is how the orientation of the star, the heavens are, and how it is that the what are called the planets of the universe, which are the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter, these 7 heavenly bodies move in circle around Polaris. There are no luminaries or planets bound to the sun or circling around the sun. All the luminaries move in orbit around Polaris. There's no exception. And as I said, there's no luminaries moving around the sun, even though they would give the appearance. And because people don't understand their motions, that can be misconstrued as being the motions for those planets. But in reality, the firmament from the North Pole down to the base of the firmament where it joins the Earth is divided into 7 concentric rings. And it is these 7 rings that each of the wandering stars are placed upon and move in circle. So it's almost like you can consider Polaris as being the sun. It's fixed at the center of this, well, I guess what you would call a solar system or a star system. That the wandering stars all move in circle and at wider and wider range as you move outward from Polaris. And so at the very top, it says in the book of Enoch, on the first and uppermost circle, I placed the stars Chrono, which is Chronos, and that is also Saturn, the star Saturn. And on the second is Aphrodite, which is Venus. And on the third, Aries or Mercury, Hermes. Oh, actually, no, Aries is Mars, sorry. The third, Aries, is Mars. And so on the first circle, closest to Polaris, you have Chrono or Saturn. And on the second one is Venus. And then you have Aries, which is Mars. It doesn't say what is on the fourth here. But on the fifth one is Zeus, which is, we know, Jupiter. And then on the sixth is Hermes, which is Mercury. And then on the seventh, Lesser, the moon, which, yes, the book of Enoch does speak about there being another moon, the lesser moon, out there in our star system, which I take that to be one of uh, those objects which are responsible for the eclipsing of the moon during the lunar eclipse, in my opinion. And on the lower, I placed the sun for the illumination of day, and the moon and stars for the illumination of night. And so we have on the lowest circle the sun and the moon and other stars. And that's in 2nd Enoch chapter 30, verses 4 and 5. This same thing with regard to the heavens being divided into these 7 portions is also spoken about in other places. Like, for instance, in the second book of Enoch, God also, this is Yeshua as the Word, speaks about dividing the heavens into these 7 portions, and how he had placed his throne above the vaulted dome, and that it's beneath the vaulted dome that the 7 heavens are created for these particular stars. So I'll read this and I'll explain it, because I'm going to go into something else that is also tied to this as well. I commanded in the very lowest parts, that is, the visible, the physical things should come down from the invisible or spiritual. And Aduel came down very great, and I beheld him, and lo, he had a belly of great light. And I said to him, Become undone, Aduel, and let the visible, the physical, come out of you. And he came undone, and a great light came out. And I was in the midst of the great light. This is Yeshua. Because remember, he is the light of the world, remember. This is also speaking about when God said, Let there be light. When everything, Sophia had descended, the Holy Spirit had descended upon the darkness and the bottomless. And then let there be light. God called forth Christ as the light of the world. And then everything became visible. And then you had, the firmament put into place, the dry land being separated from the waters, the sea level. And then, after that, the stars, the luminaries, were put into place within the tabernacle of the firmament. And so, continuing. And I was in the midst of the great light, and as there is born light from light, there came forth a great age, and showed all creation which I had thought to create. And I saw that it was good, and I placed for myself a throne, and took my seat on it, and said to the light, Go thence up higher, and fix yourself high above the throne, and be a foundation to the highest things. And above the light there is nothing else. And then I bent up and looked up from my throne. And I summoned the very lowest a second time, and said, Let Arcus come forth here. And he came forth, and from the invisible, the spiritual, and Arcus came forth hard, heavy, and very red. And I said, Be open, Arcus, and let there be born from you. And he came undone, and an age came forth, very great and very dark, bearing the creation of all lower things. And I saw that it was good, and said to him, Go thence down below, and make yourself firm, and be a foundation for the lower things. And it happened, and he went down, and fixed himself, and became the foundation for the lower things. And below the darkness, there is nothing else. And so he's talking about here how heaven and hell connect with the plane on the uh, with the plane of the earth. That the earth is the meeting place, the conjunction, the union point for the spiritual and material worlds, light and darkness. And that's how the creation is set up. Is that, God sits above the vaulted dome. You have these seven heavens, then the earth, and then you have seven hells. And I commanded there should be taken from light and darkness, and I said, Be thick, and it became thus, and I spread it out with the light, and it became water. And I spread it out over the darkness below the light, and then I made firm the waters, that is to say, the bottomless, which we know again, there's a whirlpool at the center of the vaulted dome, which drains the oceans of the water into the interiors of the earth, and also every 6 hours spews them out, and creating the high and low tide. And I made foundation of light around the water, and created seven circles from inside, and imaged the water like crystal, wet and dry. This is the firmament. that is to say, like glass, and the circumcision of the waters, and the other elements. And I showed each one of them its road, and the seven stars, each one of them in its heaven. And they go thus. And I saw that it was good. And I separated between light and between darkness, that is to say, in the midst of the water, hither and thither. And I said to the light that it should be the day, and to the darkness that it should be the night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And so you see, again, that the separation of light and darkness, the spiritual from the material, it is describing the creation of the earth and the heavens, the firmament, and also hell beneath. That these three things are what was specifically created on the first day. And then I made firm the heavenly circle, and made that the lower water which is under heaven collect itself together into one whole, and that the chaos became dry, and it became so. This is what I read earlier about how the dry land then appeared, the oceans were gathered together, sea level, all that. All right, a couple other passages about the seven heavens and how it is that the wandering stars hold. Um, I'll read one more passage before the break, I believe. Many of the ancients supposed that there were concentric spheres which were transparent but solid, and that these spheres revolved around the earth, carrying the heavenly bodies with them. In one of these spheres they supposed was the sun, in another the moon, in another the fixed stars, in another the planets, and it was the harmonious movement of these concentric and transparent orbs, which it was supposed produced the music of the spheres. That's from the Sefer Yetzirah. We're almost at break, and so I'll try to read this too. On the fourth day, God made the luminaries, the sun, the moon, and stars, of three substances, air, light, and fire. He took aerial material and prepared vessels like lamps and mixed the fire with light and filled them. And because it is the nature of fire, there was no light nor heat in that of light. The fire imparted heat to the light, and its light gave luminosity to the fire. And from these two were the luminaries, the sun, moon, and stars fabricated. All right, I think we're at break. We'll be right back for next hour.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Okay, I do believe we are now at the second hour, and so I appreciate all of you, and hopefully you'll give me a shout out in the chat to let me know we're good. But I know you are just a few minutes behind me, and so, but yeah, I've asked them to kind of get that fixed, but as of now, nothing. But it's the update, so all right. Going back to the passage that I was reading from. You'll notice that here, this is from the Book of the Bee, and it's speaking about the creation of the luminaries on the fourth day, the sun, the moon, and the stars. And it says that they are made of three substances: air, light, and fire. You notice that the earth was not mentioned as an element or a component of what the luminaries are made of, but they are made of air, light, and fire, which um, which would make sense, to me. Kind of the air and the combustion, the fire, and then the luminosity that somehow. Well, it says also in the Book of Enoch that, like for instance, the sun is the light of 1,000 angels, and that all of the stars are individual luminaries themselves, different celestial beings. And it says that they are all appointed to come forth at certain time, and that if they don't come forth, like the seven wandering stars that didn't come forth in the time appointed them, they were then banished to outer darkness, and they were replaced by other luminaries that took over their cycles. But that all the stars are celestial hosts, and they all encircle the Most High's throne, because He sits at the center, and then all of them move in circle, praising and singing to the Most High God. And that's what we see as the heavenly, the music of the spheres, as some people allude to it. All right, and he also says that from these two were the luminaries, the sun, the moon, and stars fabricated, that is, the light and the heat. The path of the luminaries is beneath the firmament, and they are not fixed as men have foolishly stated, but the angels guide them. Mar Isaac says that the sun performs his course from the east to the west and then goes behind the lofty northern mountains the whole night until he rises in the east. This is exactly what the Vedic cosmology said that I just read from. And there are other rabbinical commentaries that speak about the seven heavens and how, again, it is these concentric rings that the firmament is divided into, that the orbits and the paths of the wandering stars are guided by the angels. And they have to do their duty every day by coming forth in their appointed time, because everything works like calendar, like clockwork. Many other ancient rabbinical commentaries also speak about these seven subdivisions, which, like the Book of Enoch, describe the heavenly objects bound in tabernacle to them as being the sun, moon, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Saturn, and Jupiter. In the Sefer Zohar, the Book of Zohar, it says, firmament, from Latin firmamentum, considered as fixed above the earth. From Latin, a prop or support, from firmare, to make firm. The motion or momentum of the energy. Rabbi Yehuda said, seven firmaments or cosmoses are there on the outer space founded, and governed by the great law of universal harmony, of which the tetragrammaton or sacred name is a symbol of unity. Firmament, the Hebrew rakia. God places a firmament between the waters of the earth and the waters of heaven to separate them. Some say there are two firmaments based on a biblical verse, but most teach that there are seven. Later tradition identified the word rakia as referring to just one of the seven heavens, the level that holds the heavenly bodies. This is from Encyclopedia Mythica. These seven double letters he formed, destined, designed, created, and combined into the stars of the universe, the days of the week, the orifices of perception in man, and from them he made seven heavens and seven planets, and from nothingness, and moreover, he has preferred and blessed this sacred heptad. These seven are planets of the universe: the Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars. The 7 days are the days of creation, and these are the seven gateways of a man: his 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, and a mouth, through which he perceives by his senses. By these seven letters were also the seven worlds made: seven heavens, seven lands, seven seas, seven rivers, seven deserts, 7 days, as before 7 weeks from Passover to Pentecost, and every seventh year a jubilee. That's the Sefer Yetzirah. It's speaking on the significance of the number seven and how the Most High created from seven, the sacred heptad, the seven heavens and the seven planets, the 7 days of the week, and that the Sabbath, the Jubilees, even, with Passover, the 7 weeks, perfect weeks from Passover to Pentecost. I mean, so much is in a pattern of seven, which again is why we should honor the quarterly phases of the moon and allow them to determine the Sabbaths, because they are the only sign in the heavens that give such determination. And wouldn't it make sense that God would have something to be indicative of and to divide up the month so that we can correctly know by its movements when to celebrate Sabbath? I mean, it's common sense. And yet, because people think the lunar Sabbath is difficult to follow when it's totally not. It's so easy. It's easier, and it's the only one that you can visually go by without having to write down anything or memorize what day we are on. You can always determine by the phases of the moon what day of the month it is and when to celebrate the weekly Sabbaths. All right, continuing. The 7 days of the week are called after the seven planets: the Sun, the Venus, Mercury, the Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars. In what order are they placed in heaven? They are distributed there as Sun and Moon and the 5 planets. The firmament is divided into 7 degrees, one above the other. There are 7 distinct places for these 7 planets, and this is their order. The first degree is near the earth, and this is the lowest degree, is the habitation of the moon, in which the moon makes a circuit round the firmament. The second degree is the habitation of Mercury, in which it describes its circuit in the firmament. The third degree, the habitation of Venus, in which it also describes its circuit in the firmament. The fourth degree is the middle of them, the habitation of the Sun, which completes its circuit of the heavens in 12 months. The fifth degree is the habitation of Mars, which makes its circuit in the firmament. The seventh degree is the highest of all, the habitation of Saturn, which completes its circuit in 3 years. Interesting. This tells you what the influences of the planets are. Because again, the planetary cycles are important for certain aspects of the calendar system, which we do not incorporate. Because even those that follow the lunar solar calendar don't really pay attention to the orbits and the cycles of the planets. But these, according to Enoch, also have importance, and they affect us differently according to what they are ascribed to rule over. And I know a lot of people believe that this is uh, astrology, but it's astrology was linked to astronomy and the movement of the stars back in ancient times. So here's what it says about that. This is the order of their work. Saturn is appointed over the poor and needy, women over faintness and sickness, diseases of the body, and over death. His appearance is like that of an old man with a sickle in his hand. Mars is appointed over war, bloodshed, and the sword, over the wicked and over slander, over strife, battle, hatred, jealousy, quarrels, over warriors, wounds, injuries, bruises, over fire, water, and destruction. His appearance is like that of an armed warrior with a sword in his right hand, and he appears like a man of wrath and a stirrer up of strife. Wherever he turns, wickedness appears, ensues. He looks terrible in his coat of mail, and with the spear which he bears in his left hand. Jupiter is appointed over life, peace, and good, over prosperity, tranquility, joy, pleasant conversation, rejoicings, riches, greatness, sovereignty, and majesty. His appearance is like that of a valiant and noble looking man, and his head is that of a ram. Venus is appointed over kindness, favor, love, lust, passion, desire, marriage, the birth of man and animals, the fruits of the earth and the fruits of the tree. Its form is that of a young girl beautifully adorned and swaying a branch of a tree in her hand. Mercury is appointed over wisdom, discretion, understanding, knowledge, and the active intellect, enabling one to unravel mysteries, to devise plans in every branch of work, and in the writings of any language. Its form is that of an old man with thin lips. He possesses wings, and the lower part of the body is like a dragon. The sun is appointed over light, to separate light from darkness, and through it to enable us to calculate the days, months, and years, and to do every kind of work, to make any cunning work, to walk in a distance, and to migrate from city to city and from town to town. The moon holds the key of heaven and earth, and is appointed over morning and evening. She is set over all creatures to lead them in the right, wrong way, although she has no power in herself either to do good or evil. But everything is done by order and command. Everything was created by means of the word of God. Hence, the rabbis have said that the orbits of the sun and the circuit of the moon, the order of the stars, the arrangement of the planets, the calculation of the circuits, the lengths of the days and the division of the hours, which are at first long and then become gradually shorter, are all the work of God. And so you see, even in these passages that we have basically the, the seasons laid out and these same motions and the circuits, again, the circuits, like it says in Psalms, that the sun, the tabernacle, about the tabernacle of the sun, the sun and the moon are circling above the face of the earth. And all of the luminaries move around Polaris. I would also ask one to look up the word that we get for the word sun. It is the Hebrew word shemesh, Shemesh, shemesh. And this word comes from the Hebrew word shamash, which means to move swiftly, to run rapidly. And that's exactly what the sun is doing. So even the word that we get to describe, or the word that we get for sun, is associated to its movement, and which is why again we see that Joshua was given the authority to stop the sun and the moon, whereas in the heliocentric model for the world, it is the sun, is the earth spinning once daily as it annually orbits around the sun that should cause it to go down in setting. Um, and, that's what we find. But I've also seen where people have watched sunset with a P900 or P1000 camera. And then after the sun has supposedly, reached the vanishing point and disappeared uh, over the supposed curvature of the earth, that they zoom in on it and they bring the sun right back over the horizon, which shows to you it's not disappearing over any curvature. It's just getting so far away from us that we can't see it anymore. And yet the P900 will bring it back into focus, bring it back into zoom, and bring it back up over the horizon, which again shows you that the sun setting is not it disappearing over the curve, but it leaving our perspective and the limitations of what is our visible eye. All right. Couple other things I want to cover here. Let me pull up my notes here, and I wanted I moved pretty quickly in getting through that information, which again, understanding what the different scriptures and passages and the different wisdom traditions of, even like for in the case of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have the Vedic cosmology, that all of them are describing, just like my description of the motions of the motions of the sun, the moon, the wandering stars, the other stars, all of them circling around Polaris, that this is what creates the different calendars. You have described in Enoch a 364-day solar calendar where the sun every 30 days goes through one of the 6 gates of heaven, and these gates are these concentric rings which, spiraling outward from Polaris, um, run from the Tropic of Cancer to the Tropic of Capricorn. The first 3 rings divide the Tropic of Capricorn from the equator, and then the three innermost rings are the ones that divide the Earth from the equator to the North Pole. And these six gates of heaven, it takes the sun 30 days to go through each one of them. And then on the equinoxes and the solstices, it's either crossing the equator or reaching its southern or northern limit. It reverses course and begins moving the opposite direction. And these are the 4 days that also mark the beginning of the seasons. And as I said, the days and the 364-day year divide the solar calendar into these 91-day segments. And this calendar also falls in line with what is the lunar calendar, and the lunar calendar determines the observance of the months, the beginning of what are the months, beginning with the waxing crescent, that this is the first day of the lunar month. And then we have 4 7-day weeks, which aligning to the quarterly phases of the moon, set the sabbaths. And this is a 354-day calendar. So every year, this calendar is 10 days short of what is the lunar calendar, the solar 364-day solar calendar. And so Enoch combines these two calendars simply by adding a 13th month every 3 or so years according to the metatonic cycle. And this 13th month is aligned with the barley feast. And so whenever it turns to be March, the beginning of the year, what we consider to be the vernal equinox, if it is still cold in wintertime and the barley crop is not ready to harvest, meaning you can't have the Passover and the uh, festival of first fruits, well, then you can't have the beginning of spring. And so then you add this 13th month, Adar number 2, every 3 years or so, again, according to this metatonic cycle. And so this is what keeps the two calendars in sync with one another. It's not very difficult at all. It's, in my opinion, a lot more and visually accurate according to the motions of the sun and the moon and how they relate together. And then you have two other star patterns to consider. That is the planetary motions and the great cycle, which, for Mercury it's short, and for Saturn it takes 3 years for it to form one circle. And so these patterns also are considered with their influence on the different things that I read about earlier. Wealth, love, health, well-being, war, money, wisdom, prosperity, kindness. All of these things are determined also by these star patterns according to what is written about and spoken about in astrology, and is also linked again with the movement of the stars and the patterns of the luminaries in the sky. The other thing is as I said, the larger um, movement of the zodiac and the precession of the equinoxes. over a 25,000 year cycle. That's called the Great Year. And we move through one of the houses of the zodiac every 2,120 years, if I'm correct. And so that's what creates the bigger calendar. The real big calendar is, again, the motions of the sun through the zodiac. I'm going to read just a couple other quotes that speak about and confirm how it is that the luminaries are the celestial beings, the angels, which are, as Moses describes in Exodus chapter 24, verse 10, as Enoch, Zechariah, Ezekiel, all the different prophets describe when they are taken up to the throne room of the Most High God. Like, for instance, John in Revelation, seeing God seated on the vaulted dome of the earth, the sea of glass, and that the seraphim, the Ophanim, and the cherubim angels are all seated in circle around the Most High God. They all worship and come before Him in presence in similar manner as what we see of the star trails, the star patterns, the luminaries as they move in circle around Polaris. It says, the ministers of the glorious face in the abode of the gods of knowledge fall down before him, and the cherubim utter blessings. And as they rise up, there is a divine small voice and loud praise. There is a divine small voice as they fold their wings. The cherubim bless the image of the throne chariot above the firmament, and they praise the majesty of the fiery firmament beneath the seat of his glory. And between the turning wheels, angels of holiness come and go, as it were a fiery vision of most holy spirits, and about them flow seeming rivulets of fire like gleaming bronze, a radiance of many gorgeous colors, a marvelous pigments of magnificently mingled. The spirits of the living God move perpetually with the glory of the wonderful chariot. The small voice of blessing accompanies the tumult as they depart, and on the path of their return they worship the Holy One. Ascending, they rise marvelously. Settling, they stay still. The sound of joyful praise is silenced, and there is a small voice of blessing in all the camp of God. And a voice of praise resounds from the midst of all their divisions in worship, and each one in his place. All their numbered ones sing hymns of praise to the Most High. This passage is from the Book of the Bee. It says, heaven is like a roof to the material world and will serve as the floor of the new world. It is by nature shining and glorious, and is the dwelling place of the invisible hosts. When God spread out this firmament, he brought up above it a third part of the waters, and above these is the heaven of light and of the luminaries. Hence, people say, the heaven and the heaven of heavens, for we call both the firmament and the waters which are above it heaven. Some consider that the verse, let the waters which are above the heavens praise the name of the Lord, to refer to the holy angels and to our Lord's humanity. That's the book of the bee on the heavens. In the legends of the Jews, it says, thus one earth rises above the other, and from the first to the seventh, and over the seventh the heavens are vaulted. From the first to the seventh, the last of them attached to the arm of God. The seven heavens form a unity. The seven kinds of earth form a unity. And the heavens and the earth together also form a unity. As I said, the earth is the place where the um, the the hell is below us. The seven levels of hell come together below us. All right, one other thing here, and then I'll just share some comments. These are about the overall dynamics of the heavens. Though the heavens and the earth consist of entirely different elements, they were yet created as a unit, like the pot and its cover. The heavens were fashioned from the light of God's garment, and the earth from the snow under the divine throne. Thus, again, the earth rises above the other, the first to the seventh, and they form a unity. And the heavens and the earth together also form a unity. There's several passages which also affirm, as I have been stating, that it is the earth which is motionless. In the Bible, as well as in all the other scriptures, the extra canonical and other texts which speak about the motions of the luminaries, like the Book of Enoch, the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. There's not one passage which attribute motion to the earth, but in fact there are several passages in the Bible which affirm that the earth is fixed, stationary, and motionless, and that is the luminaries, the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter, that these seven objects all together move in circles in their orbits above the face of the earth. And you can find that in the book of Enoch, chapter 74. Uriel showed me the angel whom the Lord of glory appointed over all the luminaries of heaven, and in the world, that they might rule in the face of the sky, and appearing over the earth, become conductors of the days and nights, the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the ministers of heaven, which make their circuit with all the chariots of heaven. And so, here again, we see that is the luminaries which move. The sun looks down on everything with its light, and the work of the Lord is full of his glory. This is the wisdom of Jesus, son of Sirach, chapter 42, verse 16. In second Jubilees, and the sun rose above them to prosper them, and above everything that was on the earth, everything that shoots out of the earth, and all fruit-bearing trees, and all flesh. So, again, we see that the luminaries are created, placed into the firmament. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the great lights to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also, and God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. Which I want to pull up the Targum rendition of that, because, in my opinion, the Targum gives greater detail on every chapter and verse, and if people read it, they'll get a lot more detail on things that are seemingly left out of the scripture. And the Lord said, "Let there be light," and to enlighten above, and at once there was light. And the Lord beheld the light, that it was good, and the Lord divided between the light and the darkness. And the Lord called the light day. He made it that the inhabitants of the world might labor by it, and the darkness called he night. And he made it that in the creatures might have rest, and it was evening, and it was morning the first day. Let me go to. And the Lord said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to distinguish between the day and the night, and let them be for signs and for festival times, and for the numbering by them the account of the days, and for the sanctifying of the beginning of the months, and the beginnings of the years, the passing away of months, and the passing away of years, the revolutions of the sun, the birth of the moon, and the revolvings of the seasons." And so you see that in these passages that we have specifically the beginning of the years, the passing away of the months, the passing away of the years, the revolutions of the sun, again, the circuit of the sun, the birth and the moon, and the revolvings of the seasons, all connected to these two luminaries. And that it is, we are to determine these movements by how the luminaries are established in their circuits in the skies. And let them be for signs and for seasons, and for the sanctifying of them of the beginning of the months and the years. And so, again, in my opinion, all of us should be watching and counting the passing of time according to the motions of the luminaries. And I will be sharing this because Rob just put out a post on his Facebook asking people to explain the calendars and why they think they've got it all figured out. And it's not that, I've got it all figured out. I'm just telling you what Enoch tells us and has written in his book thousands of years ago. And that this information is what is still there for humanity to understand, but it takes accepting that we live in an enclosed system, and that it is the luminaries which move above the face of a motionless earth, which gives us these cyclical motions and movements, and that the motions of the sun, the moon, the stars, and also the zodiac are what give us the great calendar. And the universal clockwork system. And as I said, I'll be putting this together in what will be my speech at the Flat Earth conference. I know I'm not going to be able to cover all of this, but I'm going to try to rush to cover what I can to make what I'm talking about relevant to the listeners. And then I will have my notes published in book form. I've got 150 some pages of notes. And so I want to kind of condense that into a for what would be for me a short book, 50 pages, a very large and detailed pamphlet. That would be kind of my effort into trying to condense the material into, short, precise questions. And I have a lot of questions as well that I will address in the debate should I ever get to them. I'll give you an idea of what those questions are. Let me get to the first part here. So much information in this. Okay. I'm not. Okay, here it is. How is the Earth laid out? What is its shape? Which I'll share with you a few of the answers. But I won't go into the passages and the ancient sources that I have linked to this as well. The Earth is a square carved out by circular concavity. This concave basin gathers in singular containment the waters circulating below the firmament all together in one world ocean. The earthen plane is covered 2/3 over by water. The 1/3 forming the dry and habitable land was on the third day of the creation week elevated above what science calls sea level. The natural properties of water dictate that it will always stream downward in altitude towards containment, where gathered together it will form a pool and settle out in horizontal constant. It is scientifically impossible for water to adhere to a ball or settle in visual representation uh, as a sphere or a globe. Which again, I mean, that should end the debate of whether the Earth is a globe or a plane. It simply can't be a globe. I mean, it's the properties of water make it such that there's no possibility for it to take on such shape. Is there an end to the earthen plane? The area of land beyond the warming reach of the sun's transit forms the frozen outer mountainous rim of the Antarctic ice wall, which as rigid barrier constitute what the Bible references as the ends of the earth. Described in Psalms 19 and other passages, this region establishes the limit whereby the vaulted dome, merging with the earth, restricts in scope the range of the ocean's demarcation. It is the boundary restraining the waving motion of ocean movement, depicted as a laurel wreath on the flag of the United Nations. We believe this Antarctic ring to be the exterior limits of the Earth's habitable land. All right, that gives you some idea. Is the Earth hollow? According to Enoch, Lucifer and the rebel angels were cast from heaven on the second day. The pit created to accommodate their rebellion is what humanity refers to as Sheol or hell. The abysmal chasm or entrance which leads down into the interior of the earth and Satan's realm is found at the North Pole. also known as the Great Abyss or Bottomless. It is at this location that Job describes hell being exposed before the face of the Most High God. Enoch cites of this place that all the waters there are collected, drained twice a day in mighty whirlpool into the interior of the earth, and then reversing course, the same waters are expelled in geyser, which then flood the plain of the earth. This 6-hour rhythm causes and changes the cycle in high and low tide, which I attribute to being the pulsing breath of the life of the earth. Tartarus, the deepest level of Sheol, is believed by the Greeks to be uh, the holding place of the giants and the fallen angels. It is as far from the throne room of the Most High God as the vaulted dome is from the earth. Also called Gehenna or the grave, these different terms are in actuality just varying segments of what the ancient peoples believed to be the internal layers making up Hades. These are the different regions of Satan's realm which comprise in downward descent and depth the place where the wicked are held, awaiting the Lord God's judgment. What is the vault of heaven? I'll just read this last one and then we'll end with comment. According to the Bible, what is the firmament and its purpose? When one looks up the original Hebrew term translated as the English word firmament in Genesis 1:6, one will find the word rakia, which in definition refers to a solid, extended surface and broad reaching expanse. Also incorporated implicitly into the meaning of its definition is the idea that as structure, the firmament was formed in permanence, which is why it is described as being characteristically rigid, stable, hard, stiff, and unyielding in nature. One can picture it as a heavenly canopy, a vaulted arch, and a dome like curtain. It encompasses and encloses within its expanse the sky and what science calls outer space, where the heavenly luminaries are located. Its purpose is to divide the waters of the above from the waters of the below, creating an enclosed space whereby the earth could be dried and luminaries placed. It is within this enclosure that the dynamic relationship between the earth, sun, moon, stars, and elements interplay to create home for the varying creatures manifest after the establishment of the earth, the heavens above, and hell beneath. I believe the firmament to also have been created as barrier to trap the rebel angels here to this time space dimensionality so that they could, at the end of days, be judged accordingly for their perpetuation of wickedness. All right, I'm going to stop there. Yeah, I don't have time to get into anything else, but just wanted to pique your interest and also, do a show that would explain to people why it is I believe that, the calendar must be determined by the motions of the sun and the moon and stars and planets, as Enoch describes in the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. All right, God bless all. Good night.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.